Good morning, everybody. I'm Kate Seeley with the Middle East Institute. Thank you all so much for joining us today to talk about the lessons learned from the internet activism that we've seen taking place in Tunisia, Egypt, and elsewhere in the Arab world. It's been sort of fascinating to watch the interplay between sort of Arab youth and their grievances and their issues and this new media that has emerged that has finally allowed young Arabs who've been voiceless for so long to voice their grievances and to mobilize around their demands for reform. Now, those of us who've been watching the region for a long time have seen the potential that the internet could play, and we've just been waiting for a trigger event. I think it became clear back in 2008 when the April 6th movement formed in Egypt and started a Facebook page to support the workers in Mahalla in Egypt. And it was amazing because they formed this page, and within 2 weeks, 75,000 people had signed up to support the strikers in Mahalla, absolutely freaking out the Egyptian government, which quickly went after the various administrators of the page. And it sort of indicated the power of what was to come, but it also sparked a debate between those who saw the potential for new media in the future and those who said, no, actually, it's a very superficial thing. It allows people to pretend to be active, but not to truly engage, and certainly won't be helpful in fomenting a future revolution. And I think those myths have been somewhat dispelled, although I gather Malcolm Gladwell still sort of holds to the idea that new media has limitations. But today we're going to go beyond what has previously been talked about regarding new media to look at some previously undiscussed details about some of the lessons fought and rather the battles fought and the lessons learned. And we're also going to look ahead at how new media is being used in other countries, in other places like Saudi Arabia and Syria, and the battles between the government and the protesters as they seek to control this online discourse. And we're very lucky to have with us today two people who've been following this issue of new media and social activism since long before the protests emerged in Tunisia and Egypt. Adel Iskandar teaches at the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies and in the Communication, Culture, and Technology program at Georgetown University, where he's been focusing on media and communications issues. He is the author and co-author of many works on media, including Al Jazeera, the story of the network that is rattling governments and redefining modern journalism. Boy, was that very prescient. And his two forthcoming works are books on the role of new media and dissidents in the Arab world. Courtney Radsch, am I pronouncing it properly, is a senior program officer at Freedom House, where she manages the Global Freedom of Expression campaign. She's an international media expert with more than 10 years of journalism and media affairs experience in the U.S. and the Middle East. She's also the author of several book chapters dealing with media issues and is in the final stages of completing her PhD dissertation, The Revolution Will Be Blogged, Cyberactivism in Egypt, also extremely prescient. So we've got two people who saw all of this coming, and it's really a great honor and a pleasure to have you both here with us today to talk about this very interesting aspect of what's happening in the Arab world. We are going to start with Courtney, so welcome.
Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you to the Middle East Institute. I'm delighted to be here today and honored to be asked to talk about this topic, given what a timely process it is. Let's see, how do I get this to go to view slideshow? Okay, thanks. Sorry, I use a Mac. So, thank you very much for inviting me here today. I think that both Adel and I have been looking at the role of new media in the Middle East for many years now. We both started out looking at the role, I think, of Al Jazeera and the new satellite media. And for myself, when I was in Egypt in 2008, I decided to really focus on blogging and the role of digital new media, social media in the Middle East, because there were so many interesting things happening in Egypt at that point. I had started my field work in Egypt in 2006, And that was during Kifaya, the new political movement that really gave a lot of the digital media activists their first opportunity to get into the field of digital activism and political activism using new media tools. Between 2006 and 2008, there was not a lot happening. When I first got there in 2008, it was kind of boring. There was nothing going on. And then in about March, things started to pick up. There was a lot of activity going. There were more labor strikes that year than there had been in any year previous. And the digital activists had really connected with the political sphere, with the Hisham Mubarak Law Center, the Arabic Network for Human Rights, with the NGOs, and they were moving beyond just staying online and talking to themselves. And as Kate mentioned, on April 6, 2008, there was a call for a strike in solidarity with the workers in Mahalla, and it gathered. It's still undecided on whether it was successful. I was in the streets that day in Tahrir, and they were empty, and there were no cars, and there were so many police, it was scary. But at that point, it was unclear what was the goal. They really didn't have a defined goal at that point. And many of them talked to me, and they told me, this is practice. We're getting ready for something bigger. And I think that we saw with the Al-Baradei campaign, then with what happened, obviously, on January 25th and beyond, that practice indeed worked. And so what I want to talk to you about today is just putting into perspective some of this digital activism. What can we look for in other countries compared to Egypt? How important is Facebook? How important are tools like Twitter and mobile phones and internet access? And I think one of the key things to keep in mind is that it's the convergence of these technologies. It's the combination of mobile phones with internet, with social media, and using these all for political activism in countries where there is really no freedom of the press, limited freedom of expression, and limited civil and political liberties. So if we look at a map here that I pulled from Liza Sabater, you can see where some of the protests have broken out. So really it's all across the region. And so we want to look at what are some of the characteristics of where these protests are broken out and what might we learn. So if we look at the internet penetration, mobile penetration, and Facebook penetration rates, first of all, to me what's fascinating is that mobile penetration far exceeds what internet penetration, much less Facebook penetration rates are. And one of the interesting things about that is that when you look at the number of people who have 3G phones in the more advanced countries, they're using their mobile phones to access the internet. And in countries like Egypt, several activists, even as far back as 2008, told me the most important thing for them was their mobile phone and that they were able to send mass SMS messages and able to take video and take pictures. So even though I'm sure a lot of these mobile phone statistics are reflecting the traditional phone, maybe a basic camera, the activists certainly are using 3G technology. And I think it's interesting, if you look, for example, Bahrain, there's quite a stirring going on there. There's been a lot of political activism, but I would say it's much more mixed between the online and the offline. If you look at Egypt, see a pretty significant level of internet penetration at 20%. And you can also look over, for example, at Libya, you see a very low rate of internet penetration and very low rate of Facebook penetration. So what might that tell us?